Okay.
Hello, gentlemen of the panel. How are we doing?
Very well.
We're doing well?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. How are you all doing? Yeah? Come on, last panel. Let's go. The wave. The wave is always appreciated. I was doing the wave in a very inappropriate time yesterday during a photo operation so I do not recommend it. All right, well, welcome everyone. I am excited to be moderating this panel entitled Creative Uncertainty, Who Owns the Output of a Machine? My name is Yvette Montero Salvatico, and along with the illustrious Frank Spencer, I co-lead a firm called TFSX, based out of the United States, serving the globe. And our mission is to democratize the field of foresight, and we do this by inspiring people to unlock their inner futurist. It is my extreme honor to be moderating this panel with a series of experts that I am then humbled to be in their audience as you all. And I would encourage you all to think of yourselves as the fourth panelist. Because we are going to do 30 minutes of conversation with the panelists, and then there's going to be Q&A. And so that part of it is only as good as your questions. So start thinking about them now. All right? Excellent, excellent. All right, so of course, unless you've been asleep for the last year, you've heard a lot about AI, and specifically things like generative AI, like ChatGPT, right? How many of you have used ChatGPT? For some excellent, excellent. I'm curious, for those of you that have used it maybe for a work product, how would you feel if after you produced the work product, someone came after you and said, actually that work product belongs to the AI? Or better yet, we have to figure out how the AI learned all of that, and those people have to get credit for your work. That's the kind of conversation we're going to have today, is really understanding what are the implications to intellectual property with the prevalence of artificial intelligence and related technologies. Sound like a good idea to talk about that? Excellent. All right, so let me just introduce my incredible panelists here. Let me get to their, I shortened their bios because it would have been the whole session.
Yeah,
they've done a lot of things, so that's why, but, okay, so Matt Hervey is head of artificial intelligence at Gowling WLG and advises on artificial intelligence across all sectors, including automotive, life sciences, finance, and retail. He is joint general editor of the Law of Artificial Intelligence. And Matt was made a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in 2022 in recognition of his leadership in the field of AI. A round of applause for Matt, please. Excellent. All right. Professor Dario Floreano is director of the Laboratory of Intelligent Systems, and I'm going to go with the acronym here, EPFL, because I will not do a good job with that. Maybe you can tell us the full name, but I know it's in Switzerland. He holds an MA in visual perception, an MS in neural computation, and a PhD in robotics. Round of applause. Excellent. And Khalifa Qama is from the UAE, and he is the head of labs at the Dubai Future Foundation. This is since 2018, and that lab includes laboratories such as the R Lab as well. Thank you so much. All right, Matt, you're going to kick us off. I hope you're ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a question and then either a rebuttal or an elaboration by one of the other panelists. We'll do this until we get to 30 minutes, and then it's your turn. All right, sounds good? All right, first question. All right, so for those of you that don't know, I'm a futurist, and a big part of our work is framing focal issues. And one of the things that we do when we frame a focal issue is we ask ourselves, or we ask our stakeholders, what is keeping you up at night as it relates to this issue? So I thought, what better way to start this conversation than ask the head of AI law for a global law firm, what's keeping you up at night as it relates to patent, copyright, law, and AI?
Okay, so I didn't know you were going to ask that.
I know, I try to keep you on the edge of your...
Great.
No, it's good.
That's great.
I told you, just riff.
Yeah,
just
no,
riff.
I love it. I sleep very well because I've done my research and I've written the book and I know the answers, so I'm delighted.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
But to set out where we are, IP is 400 plus years old, and it's always been an artificial construct that governments have allowed its citizens. And it has had two bases. One is commercial, to encourage certain activities like inventions, and the other is ethical, to allow an author to be recognized for their work and to be compensated. The problem is that most of these principles were never written with AI in mind. And so, for example, European patent law was written before I was born, so it definitely never had the current generative AI in mind. So the issue we have is there is no harmonization to the extent our law covers it at all, and most of it has been untested. What we know so far is a series of test cases about patents have shown that where you are foolish enough to name an AI as the inventor of an invention, you are not entitled to a patent. And so around the world, those patents have been refused by patent offices. There has been one exception. That was South Africa, but there they don't have what we call substantive examination. They, as a matter of administrative process, they granted the patent without studying the issue. The other issue we have is the US Copyright Office. So in the US, you can register copyright. So they have forced the issue in the US by trying to register works where the people registering it said the works were by an AI. And again, the US Copyright Office has said, in those circumstances, there is no copyright in that work, and it is a matter of public domain. So to answer your question, if you're using generative AI at work, the received wisdom is that in the majority of the world, that is public domain. No one is going to own it. At most, you might be able to keep it a secret if you're not going to publish it and control the output. Now, there are some exceptions, and I know you want to talk about international harmonization as well, but just to give you a flavor of the exceptions, it is not clear, going back to patents, whether an AI invention is in fact patentable. If you name an AI, it's not patentable. But what we don't know is under each nation's rules, whether an invention becomes an invention before a human person has seen it and has it in their mind. So they may in fact be patentable, and we actually need to wait for that huge answer to be established by the courts. The other point is that copyright, there are 6 jurisdictions in the world, to my knowledge, where the output of an AI is in fact copyright. The UK is one of them. We call it computer-generated works. It has its own regime of 50 years protection, and it's owned by the person making the arrangements. Very similar provisions have been copied in Ireland, India, South Africa, and Hong Kong. And the Ukraine, since the beginning of the year, has had a sui generis, a special form of protection for computer-generated works. So that gives you a sense of the problem.
It does. It's going to keep me up at night, definitely, for the next few nights, because it sounds like the Wild Wild West a little bit, right? So a lot of it we're sort of waiting to see. There's some sense of where we're headed. I'm interested, Khalifa, in your perspective, from an innovation perspective. So I'm an innovator attempting to create things that are going to be useful now and into the future. And I'm interested in using a technology like AI. How do you feel hearing sort of this perspective from our advice from our legal attorney, who's not providing our advice because he's not our attorney, but he gave us these insights. What are you feeling right now? How would you approach it? What should we be doing as innovation folks?
Funny enough, honestly, they actually are. We use them in the lab, that's what we use. But yeah, for this purpose, I would say, hypothetically, there are always 2 ways of thinking about producing innovative work that could potentially be useful to society. And you'd think one way to say that I'm going to invest a lot of money and effort, and this effort needs to be recognized, the people who worked on it need to be recognized, and then it needs to be protected. The other route that one could take, and especially in this time of uncertainty, and maybe it's not the most popular, but I would argue it is the most useful, is saying that we're going to recognize the people who worked on it and make sure that the benefit reaches and it stays open source. Because if you think of the majority of the technologies that we use right now, or even the large companies and corporations that use as a bedrock of what they built the iPhone on, as an example, or Google on, is an open source software. So especially at a time, my opinion, like this, where you do not and cannot comprehend what's going to happen in 6 months with this technology, I think the minute an innovator thinks or comes up with something that is useful, a very good route to think about, or a frame of mind to have, is to say, let's keep it open. Let's keep it open and build upon it, because in reality, this is, I don't think, going to stop anytime soon. And the more open source we have, and the more contributions we have from scientists and inventors from all around the world to these platforms, the more beneficial it's going to be.
Fantastic. And of course, there's that constant tug of war between wanting to have something accessible and open, providing recognition, and building something that, or providing a system upon which others are incentivized to continue building and innovating, right? So again, I think we could all appreciate the benefits of open source, but also recognize that our current systems do absolutely reward the idea of intellectual property. But I'm struck by the fact that when you speak about this idea of open source and giving recognition, it's a very human-centric approach. And I love that, because when we think about the future, we love to imagine the future being all about technology, but ultimately, the future is about people. And if we fail to put humans at the center of our visions of the future, then we will never create more equitable futures for all. So I'm curious, Professor Dario, if you can share with me, because we spoke briefly yesterday, and I thought you were so eloquent in stating how important it is to keep humans in the equation when we're thinking about this technology. You could talk about AI or robotics or however you want to frame that, but can you share a little bit about your philosophy around humanity and the relationship with these technologies?
Yeah, sure. We want to say that we embrace the technology. It's great. I do it personally. Maybe I don't use it enough, I must say. My students, PhD students, researchers use it all the time. And I want to say also that beside being a professor, I also spin off companies, and I'm personally involved in co-founding companies that have been very successful. They grew, and before they sold to hundreds of people. And these companies use patents as part of their assets. It's not the only thing. The evaluation of the company is not only based on patents, but it's part of the equation. And so, as we see today, as we generate research and we ask questions, we ask ChatGPT. We use ChatGPT, but you may use Falcon, which is increasing the power, and it's also open source even. And it's like an interactive process where the human, the student, myself, I ask questions. Instead of reading a lot of stuff, I ask the machine questions, and I find it useful. Now, you have to understand what these machines give you back, because sometimes you have to check, really. But it's an interactive process. So I see there are two things when it comes to intellectual property. There is a situation now which is chaos. Everyone uses it, and we do not know exactly what to do, and we have done something good, and AI is part of it. Unfortunately, as Matt mentioned, there are rules today. Humans in most jurisdictions must be part of the story. Then what is going to happen in 5 years' time, when these tools and regulations are, and this is what I think Khalifa just mentioned, maybe we should really go more like open source and consider all this patenting, it's costly, maybe it's good for lawyers, but okay. And then there is the long term. And in the long term, I think about 20 years from now, these machines will continue to become more powerful and generate things that we cannot even think about. Why should we leave it on the side? And so here the question is, I do not know if it's going to be open source or it's not going to be open source, but we must make sure that the person who interacts with the machine stays relevant. Because if we let the machines do all of this, and then we just do the things that machines today cannot do, which is manual work, plumbers, carpenters, all these things, robots today cannot yet do. That artificial intelligence for robots is not yet there. If we humans only do that, click a button to get the question, we are no longer relevant. And that's where I feel today the fear, and the reason maybe for this panel is because people are worried about what happens. And I have other parts of it, but maybe I can get back to it later, maybe.
Absolutely, yes, you're up.
So I would just point out that I agree with both your perspectives, and I wonder how much your perspectives are really about technology and technological developments and how we want those to be open source. And I totally agree that one of the challenges of AI is the concentration of power in the very few hands of the great AI companies. And if their outputs are open source, that might erode that concentration of power. And if I look at the life sciences space, obviously I'd like as many successful treatments, preventative medicine, and obviously I want to open those floodgates. I just want to challenge two points and see what you think. The first is, in life sciences, if I generate a new small molecule that treats a disease, it can be reverse engineered on day one when it hits the market. And the manufacturer may have spent up to $500 million on clinical trials getting it to that point. So they need some form of monopoly to make that market work. And then maybe later we can talk about the creative industry, because I think that's another issue, another angle, but maybe life sciences first.
So it's good that you started with this point, and you said the construct of an intellectual property is something that we humans have come up with, 400 years ago?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Patents, yeah.
Patents. I think, and maybe this is something we can allude to right now, to say that it might be time, and since we're talking about the future and future foresight, it might be time to reassess the tools that we manage our innovation with. We have patents. I think there is room to think about some new form of protection that might be a little faster, that inherently allows collaboration to happen near automatically instead of asking for permission and getting a lot of people to be involved. Just simply because if we look at two things. First of all, the proliferation of technology that is happening today, it makes it only accessible to really large companies to patent and protect themselves really well, where it disadvantages the more nimble, smaller teams. And I think leveling the playing field could be of benefit to society overall. So proliferation is something that should be addressed with this new governing or framework, let's call it that. And the second thing is making sure that monopolies don't really happen. Because right now, take a guess, how many patents are on a phone without naming names? Right?
You're excluded from this test, sir.
I would guess in the order of 40,000.
So it's around 1,400 direct and above 70,000, actually 100,000 indirect. So massive amounts. And the minute you start doing the calculation of patents and how much would it cost and to protect any new invention, it becomes abundantly clear that potentially a new framework could allow the consistency and the proliferation of technology to keep happening, instead of right now us humans putting constructs that potentially are hindering or slowing down the progress.
Spoken like a true futurist. I love this idea of let's not just take our current measurements and systems as a given, but challenge that as well. But
yeah, I just want to add something about this topic. We briefly discussed yesterday about this with Matt. I understand some industries like pharmaceuticals have an interest in keeping their patents and their IP alive for the reasons that you mentioned, because it costs so much. But as AI and ChatGPT and Falcon advance, at the same time we have organs on chips advancing. You have AI that predicts much faster the effects of molecules, generate molecules. And so the costs of testing, generating and testing those drugs is going to decrease. You will have less and less animal tests and less clinical tests because AI will produce it. So I think the two things will balance off. Now for the next maybe 10 to 20 years, we will have still this dilemma. We will discuss, figure out rules. Yeah. But in 20 years' time, I don't think this is any more relevant. There will be different models of making this happen.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your participation in that exchange. Khalifa, I have another question for you, and I'm going to, again, encourage all of you to be thinking about your questions because you're up next. So I learned yesterday from your esteemed fellow panelists this idea of the AI winter, right? Oh, yeah. And that there have been, are you all familiar with the idea of an AI winter? See, neither was I. Let me show you what I learned. So there's been several AI winters in history, and essentially it talks about a time when AI was effectively hyped up to a point, and then something happened and it crashed. I think the first one was because some MIT professor said, I don't like it. So, okay. Anyway, so of course we're in, potentially another hype cycle now, right? So I'm wondering what you think, Khalifa, in terms of, are we getting ready for another AI winter, or do you believe that the true potential of this technology has met its match, and we're at that moment in time when we're going to see its continuation into the future?
I'd love to be corrected here, but I think there were a few winters.
There were several winters.
Several winters.
Yes.
And potentially there will be one in our age. However, I also would like to say that at every winter, there was still a proliferation of use of this technology, right? Maybe it wasn't at the forefront of our, consciousness because it's not in the news as it is now, yes. But there is always a trickle down of this technology. And I think this time it's different just because of two things. Before I answer, I'd ask the question. Who here has heard of Q-Star? Okay, good. Huh? Heard, yes. So the claim in the white papers right now say that they've taken LLMs, which is ChatGPT essentially, and put some other methods called reinforcement learning with them, and it seems to, at least on paper, improve the output by 30x. So think of ChatGPT 4 and then think 30x. What does that really mean? Again, white papers, but there seems to be enough evidence to say this is coming. Who knows? This might keep going, and there is a chance it is a hype and it will slow down. However, I am certain that because of the amount of attention this got, and the funding it got, and the talent pool that has been now created because of the attention, I think the proliferation of such a technology is going to take years for us to see the end of that benefit of. So yes, the hype is important to really monitor and see. I think the progress that we have made until now would take years for us to start benefiting out of it, whether in the medical field or others.
Yeah, so I agree with Khalifa, and I think we are the tipping point was happened sometime in February this year, 2023, probably is going to be the year, and the fact that there are large companies and products we use every day that adopted, embraced this technology before even having regulations shows that we cannot easily turn back. However, I think there is danger, and it goes back to your original point of humanity. At some point, things may go out of control in the sense that some people feel excluded. They've not been educated to use this technology, and so they start to be skeptical about this. Their work decision becomes taken by a machine. They start to question that. It goes up to the political level, or there is some wrong decision these machines make. But I think it's going to be more gradual, and this is going to be a problem. Here we are like rich countries. All of us come probably mostly from rich countries, but there's like maybe 3% of the humanity, and the rest is not there. But also our 3%, if we continuously delegate this task to these machines, the question is, we do not understand anymore what these machines do. And so it's important that we, for example, as a professor, I think, I'm asking myself, how do I teach the engineers how to use this machine? Rather than prohibiting from using in the class, I should just, and these kids are really very smart, so I should say, go out, use them, and then I have to invent different ways in which they have to test, check, understand what is happening. Because if we don't do this in the future, then this is going to fire back. We will just not understand what is happening, and we will have a backlash.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example of what we see time and time again of not bringing others along, not bringing communities along, regardless of the change. In this case, it's a very powerful technology, but in reality, that's a lot of what we do as foresight professionals, is we aim to bring people along to be able to adapt and have a futurist mindset, to think critically about these tools and these issues that have, ramifications to all domains. Like, there's not one domain that this conversation will not impact. We focused on the technology, obviously the legal implications, and some societal, but there's no place where this will not touch. I'm curious, Matt, with this conversation about whether this is overhyped or whether we're heading into another AI winter. what you think that means to the legal ramifications and sort of bring this full circle to
Sure.
where you kicked us off.
Okay, so my view on the hype cycle, etc. In my career, I've had to look at a lot of new technologies, and 3D printing was the classic example of overhype.
Please tell us all about 3D printing. That must have been a great example.
I called it at the time as mere puffery and wasn't going to go anywhere, and I was definitely right on that one. But AI has felt different from the off, and I've been looking at AI for over a decade, all because of a Wired magazine article on self-driving cars. Amazing technology, clearly going to be disruptive, massive legal implications, and off I went. And in that 10 years, it has remained not only strong, but stronger every time. Okay. And I would say in the short time I've been doing it, I've gone from the Internet of Things, machine to machine, big data, smart cities, to what I would call the silver bullet, the narrow domain AI, where you spend up to 8 figures on the right data to do one single thing, to generative AI and foundation models, which is the current revolution, where you've trained on the entire internet, big copyright issue, big privacy issue. You've trained on maybe 5 billion images for an image generator, and it can do anything. That's the issue. And so we're at the point where we've got a platform. The fact that OpenAI has launched an app store, essentially, allowing you to train your own app on the foundation platform, shows, I think, that there are serious legs left in this. Now, in terms of the law, there's a whole issue around regulation, which we could touch on, but in terms of IP, ownership of outputs, the huge current debate is whether people should have been allowed to train on the entire internet. The real issue there is if that is necessary for the technology, that it has that diverse training set, there is no number those companies could afford to pay for all information. So it is actually a social question primarily, what we should do about it. Then the second issue is, should we allow machines to compete in terms of technology and copyright with humans? And you could argue that it would be better for outputs to be public domain. No, other way around. You would make them copyright so that they are equally expensive as human outputs. If they become public domain, you can use them without cost, which makes humans uncompetitive with the output. So there is a massive social aspect to this. And as I said, full circle, as you asked, IP is a social construct. It's artificial, it's intangible property, and it is there for social ends. And what we really need is an economic and political solution which IP can fit into. But I definitely don't think IP alone can fix the problem. We need regulation as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we've given you a lot to think about and go on. I think we have, do we have another mic? I think, yes, he's coming now. And do you have a question? Okay, we have one right up front. And then everyone else, thinking caps on, and then I see you there. Okay, she had her hand first. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the panel, and thank you for mentioning the AI winter. It's my first time hearing about it. And it was interesting that Dr. Khalifa said maybe you're foreseeing another AI winter. In the past, it's understandable because we didn't have the compute power, and maybe if it existed, it's costly. So in the future, if there is an AI winter, what would be the cause? Is it policy?
Sure.
Is it the social aspect?
To clarify, I say might, as in it's not really clear. It is possible, but it might. I think AI in the 80s was very useful, right? And it blew people's minds away, I'm sure. But there was a threshold where it couldn't go any further, right? Yes, I agree now the tools are different, the methods are different, the algorithms are different. But potentially there will be a time where you will say it reached its threshold. To me, that's a winter, right? We don't know when that's going to come, but I think that's why I digressed and said, whether it comes or not, potentially. Yeah. not. I think the effects of what we live in right now is not going to be affected by the winter, no matter what happens, is maybe what I meant to say.
Excellent.
All right.
Hello. All right. Does anyone remember Phil Donahue? Yes, that's right.
Hi. Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. So I had actually a two-part question. Sorry, can you hear me?
Just hold it a bit closer.
A bit closer?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is actually about whether or not you all might think that the principles of AI ethics that we're trying to promote today, which have a lot to do with the ways in which we disclose the usage of AI, especially generative AI, in a variety of different human sort of processes and outputs, is disincentivized. So are we disincentivizing ethical use of generative AI through the kind of copyright laws that exist today? So for example, if copywriting is so much limited today to human-produced outputs, does that in fact disincentivize ethical usage of AI, especially generative AI? Because disclosure might lead to some kind of consequence in which one does not get patents or does not get, et cetera. So that's the first question. The second question is about actually the nature of the kind of laws and the kind of regulations that we might need to develop in order to sort of deal with some of the, I would like to think of them as kind of existential questions that AI, generative AI is bringing up, which have to do with maybe not only how we think about property, intellectual property, but in fact the commons. So the ways our actual theories of the commons might also need to change, of how we think about what intellectual property actually is from a foundational kind of perspective, rather than just from how do we apply current copyright laws or patent laws to thank you.
Sure. Oh, is mine still working?
Is that one still working? Yeah.
Okay. So my instinct on the law versus ethics is that the law is trying to enforce ethical solutions. So the AI Act, which is in draft in the EU, requires, for example, transparency that AI has been used in various circumstances. So that is ethical, that you know what you're dealing with. Controversially, and we don't know if this will survive the current negotiations, if you were to deploy a foundation model made into a generative AI in the EU, you had to disclose a list of all the copyright works you used to train it. So exactly what you want. But the flip side of any law that makes you do the right thing is that you would rather not disclose it. And so perversely, that means people will deploy it outside of the EU and train outside of the EU. We already have forum shopping for training. So there's a thing called text and data mining, where you mine copyright works for the raw data to train an AI. And that is not harmonized. And Singapore has a much more generous provision for that than, let's say, the UK. And we are seeing companies jurisdiction shop to get around those ethical issues. I think that's people gaming the system. I don't think the attempt to impose ethical considerations is bad in itself just because it makes people change their behavior to get around it. I think overall it is the right thing to do. Then your second question was about what is intellectual property for? Should we go back to the roots of it, etc.? My interest there is whether business models will develop which simply don't rely on IP at all. So if we were talking about pharmaceuticals, if we move to a point where AI is developing small molecules based on rich data and your own personal data, if we move into an era of personalized medicine, there's no need for IP anymore because every object you supply is different. They're all unique. And it could be, I'm not sure if it's going to be a good idea, but it could be that the idea of Netflix and movies being made and being copyrighted and licensed will be replaced by the idea that you get entertainment on demand according to your mood, your interests, which are generated on the fly. And again, because it's a one-to-one business, not a one-to-many, the supplier doesn't need any IP. So I suspect market forces will determine the value of outputs if we don't expand IP. But I also think governments should be looking at IP as one of the tools in their toolkit to affect social change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You had the next question? And then we'll go to the back. Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned market forces. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, if that's okay. So OpenAI, for instance, is clear they have a governance problem, which is going to lead to a conflict between benefit of humanity versus maximization of profit. So, do you think we have learned anything from the Cambridge Analytica debacle?
No.
And how is that going to play out in the world of AI?
Sure. So from a purely legal situation, companies are required, where they are a public company, to maximize profits. That's their raison d'etre. You can get ethics into the equation if you show the return on investment. And I think reputation is so valuable now that many companies have a genuine commitment to ethics. They may be only doing it for the money, but at least it's happening. But it is definitely an imperfect system. And that is why we need regulation. You can't leave it up to the private sector to make sure we end up with responsible outcomes. The danger of Cambridge Analytica is that in a situation where you are trying to get a vote, you are not held to any standard when you can whisper in each individual's ear a different message. Okay, so no one is able to test you and hold you to that standard. And I think there is an inherent problem with big data and AI, and as I already mentioned, this idea of bespoke content, so that you might always get different content to me, and that will drive diversity, no, that's the wrong word, division. It will drive division. And I don't see in any of the regulation being proposed any solution to that at all. So whereas many companies are required to do impact assessments under the AI Act of what will happen if they deploy this, no one is able to monitor the impact on society as a whole. And that is a massive gap in all of our regimes. And I don't have a solution for you, I'm afraid. And I think the problem is here already, Cambridge Analytica, etc. And we haven't solved it.
So I feel like you weren't 100% truthful in your first answer when I asked you what's keeping you up at night, because that was the answer, sir. That was it. You buried the lead. I'm curious what the rest of our panelists think about this topic. You're not touching with the 10-foot pole? They're like, no, Matt's got it. It's good.
Maybe just one thing. I think it is time to think about what we humans hold as absolute truths, potentially. That's a difficult topic to talk about. And what morals and standards do we hold or hold each other to, instead of waiting for regulation and the governments to really hold us towards. So at the end of the day, it is the human who is in charge and responsible. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. For me, it's the human. The technology is just a tool.
Yeah. Are we responsible enough for AI? I believe that we weren't old enough for the internet, but that ship has sailed. I think there was another question back here. If we go to the back. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all so much for your insights today. So I'm a writer and a creative, so definitely the IP, all of this is very important. And as I talk to other, especially young writers, where would you suggest is kind of the right places for creatives to be looking to get this information to protect themselves now and their work when it comes to training models, et cetera, but also where creatives should be paying attention to be active voices in the conversation of what we're doing going forward?
Okay, I'll do technology. I'll do law first. So the AI Act allows you to opt out as a rights holder, and at that point you shouldn't have your material trained upon. But it's a very loose technology. If you're publishing online, you can use a robot's text file to say people shouldn't scrape you. For images, not text, there's all sorts of technology to poison the data and the like, but there aren't really very good solutions. And I can tell you, having worked a lot with the collective societies, so people who represent writers or artists or musicians, they don't have the money to take on these companies. So there aren't many voices speaking up, I'm afraid, from a legal perspective.
Again, Matt being the buzzkill. Yeah. Panelists, anybody else want to come in here with the more?
So I write books, and including books about the future, a recent one a year ago by MIT Press. And I started to think about, do I need to write books in the future? Do I need to dedicate some time to this? And I believe that people, maybe a lot of people just want to read and they don't care who is behind the book, but very often who is behind the book is as important as what is written in the book. And so maybe you may use these tools to help yourself get inspiration of something, but then at the end of the day, the consciousness, the emotions, the feelings that these machines cannot have yet, this is called artificial general intelligence. It's not yet here, and it's going to be maybe for the future. But I believe for the next many years, it's not going to be an issue, except for the copyrights. Yes, that's a topic.
We're all going off the grid, I think. There's one behind you. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to get your reaction to the possibly the scenario or the idea that we're moving from a shop and purchase economy to a design and license economy where a lot of goods could be customized to the individual. So say you want to get an electric car, you could license and you could 3D print the engine of the car, but then you want to make the chassis of the car look like a 1969 Dodge Daytona, which was a real gas guzzler. If that kind of thing is possible, and if so, what are the implications for intellectual property? Will the economy be going more toward companies designing these unique things and appealing to consumers rather than just selling things over the counter?
Go for it.
May I just say something about, so I was involved in companies that build robots, and when it comes to the real world, to the manufacturing, yes, 3D printing is, maybe it's not the big hype there was, it's used, but hardware is difficult. So manufacturing, personalized manufacturing is difficult. I do not think that these type of tools will affect those type of tangible objects for a very long time.
So no Jetson replicator anytime soon.
Not anytime soon.
That's sad for me.
Is what we're saying.
Yes, there's another question.
I would say that what you said was design and license. Yeah. And license implies that there was some rights you license, so you need some IP for that model. The question is whether you move actually to bespoke, no rights at all, and people are paying for compute time, or they go to a trusted brand for the design, and whether you end up with a business model not predicated on IP at all.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more.
What about, yeah. Make them quick so we can add one more. Okay.
A lot of pressure.
My question is, with AI and all of these amazing technologies that we have, we can see that there's a big difference now between nations and communities, as being mentioned. There are rich places where they can have it easily, where a huge amount of humanity are looking forward for such kind of technology. I think part of having a technology is to speed the evolution of humanity and bridging the gap between the nations, those nations that has been growing very fast in the past centuries, and those that have been deprived completely, or not deprived, let's say that they are not yet there. And how it will help in bringing more of the new generation into a better world, where there is a better education, equality for all of the kids. So again, there won't be someone who is a Harvard student who can get very high pay, and someone else who couldn't afford Harvard and he couldn't get that kind of pay. What do you think of AI and all of this technology? Not only AI, because AI, I think it's just only one branch of the technology that is already evolving. So all of this technology, how are they truly going to transform humanity? Is it part of the researches of the PhD? Is it part of the studies in universities? What are we going to do with all of this engineering? How is it going to help the other countries, the less fortunate? Better medicine, better water. So this is my question for you. Thank you so much.
So who's going to take that one? I mean, I think at the end of the day, these technologies are neither bad nor good. It's on how we apply them. And I think it's up to every single one of us, especially in convenings like this, to have these conversations, to go to the polls, to vote, to speak and write about these issues, and to leverage experts like those of our panel. Round of applause for our panelists. And I'm a stickler for time.
Okay,
Go for
I
it.
promised him that question, so let's do this.
Why are you making promises?
We all make promises. Thank you so much for great messages. My name is Philip McMaster. I'm from Conscience Land, and I would just welcome you as citizens of Conscience Land. And I have a very important question about the Conscience LARP, the live action role-playing game, which requires benevolent AI. And I have heard a lot about, what we're talking about, the commercial world and the copyrights and these objects. What about the Earth itself? We're coming up on COP28 in a couple of days, and that's why I'm here. But we're needing to use AI to solve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's a benevolent use of AI. So do you have some thoughts about this? And maybe we can talk about it later, but
since my English is my second language, just maybe someone can tell me, benevolence means?
For good.
Well-meaning.
For good?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my opinion, I'd love to hear it from you, technology, as we just said, is neither good or bad. It's the teleology that we put on top of technology that determines if it's good or not, right? So it is up to us as humans, individuals, to decide how we can utilize them for SDGs or something that is not good. So I wouldn't ever look at technology to be itself, in and of itself, either good or evil, is really my answer. And how do we use them for SDGs? I think it's on all of us, and I'll leave it to that. Yeah?
Anyone else want to add to that?
That's great.
Fantastic. I'd also add that if you look into the IDGs, the Inner Development Goals, I don't know if you're familiar with those, but there's a strong link between the IDGs and foresight and futures thinking. And if we want to make headway on the SDGs, it's going to take each of us exploring our own behavior and our own mindset, as well as those across the communities that we serve and belong to. So again, panelists, thank you so much. Round of applause. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that's great. Oh, you too. It's great. Really good.
it's a big question.